Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Terra Prime Live. Special workshops here at the end of the year, end of 2020. And we are going to continue our look into some of the more odd and strange styles of drunken and monkey. I will be going over some drunken weapon stuff today, theory and all that kind of thing. We'll kind of talk a little bit about what it entails traditionally and, of course, what we can gain from it from the practice of it. So again, so like we said last time, as far as with the drunken style, it's not necessarily always a standalone style. It's debatable on whether a whole lot of kung fu styles are intended to be standalone styles or not, depending on what they are. But drunken style is something that is often added as an adjunct to another system. It's common in some Southern styles. Choi La Foot, I know, has a drunken form. The famous famous Wong Fei Hong is famous for knowing some drunken or whatever, and I think in some lineages of Hunga there are some drunken forms, but there are also kind of styles built around it. 8 Drunken Immortals, and that my teacher learned 8 Drunken Immortals when he was a young boy. It was, it's a young person's art. Has a lot of falling, a lot of returning, a lot of acrobatics, a lot of really kind of, physically challenging things that often draw people away from it, take back. But there is a practical side to it. It's a practical side which is difficult to even understand until you get to a particular level of experience, just because of the nature of fighting and conflict and weapons and that kind of thing. So the basic premise around drunken style is that you act drunk. Your movements have a drunken style to them. It's not a real drunken style. It's like you don't actually look like you're legitimately trashed. It's a kind of stylistic drunk, right? We have the walk, which we went over. We'll go over here a little bit and how it integrates with a weapon. But you have particular poses, the cup hand. There's a lot of things that come from a theatrical background, which are giving the cues of being drunk and kind of allowing you to explore these ideas. So the main idea that you have is one of deception, right? And one of looseness, relaxation, and kind of a chaos type of thing, right? You want to be unpredictable. And, throwing these types of movements into your training can help you develop that. As we said, it's not necessarily that you will put these things in those, in fighting as they are. So you're not, you may not see that type of thing, but you can, like I said, sometimes I throw those in there just for fun. But anyway, when you're dealing with a weapon, now you're dealing with exploring kind of how, now a foreign object is going to be reacting to that. If we are very interested in how our body moves when it's not being powered, like when it's falling, you're right, when it's stumbling, all of these things which are taking away the need for us to put a whole lot of force into what we're doing, right? How are those things related, and how does that then relate to our weapon? Again, I'm using a short stick here. Obviously, most drunken stick forms that you see will be done with a longer stick, using this for convenience, and it will show a good kind of transition between long weapons and short weapons as this kind of goes on. So we're not going to go into any of the really difficult kipping up and falling down and all that stuff, because there's a lot of stuff that you can do with break falling and that kind of thing with especially with a stick. There's lots of posts where you'll use the stick as a kind of a platform by which you hold yourself up and go into a pose. Sometimes you literally lean on it as if you are having trouble walking, that kind of thing. But we're not going to go into that kind of stuff, because that kind of stuff is, ancillary to the actual purpose. So what we'll go into is the things that we can use. And one of the things that we are going to glean from this type of training is relaxed manipulation of our weapon and learning how to use the forces of gravity and momentum and inertia to our advantage. So we have to put very, very little effort, and it's almost a comically amount of effort, right? Small amount of effort, right? We want to be almost, and this is again why it's linked to drunkenness, right? As if we are really, really drunk and we can hardly power our movements, right? We're constantly like this. That's the kind of feeling that we're going to get. It has obviously a flow to it. It has a reactiveness to it. And this is something that we always like to foster in martial arts, especially as we get to higher levels. Martial arts, weapons in particular, are all labor-saving devices, technology, and methods, right? They're there to allow people who cannot simply outmove or overpower their opponent. So it's very similar to Tai Chi. Drunken takes it to a very, very extreme level. So let me get the thing here. Of course, ask all questions. I've got the live chat going. We'll keep that going if you have any questions. But these will be all very, very fairly simple. Now, one of the reasons that we're doing this is we've gotten a lot of requests for more saber staff, double-ended saber type of movements. So in that sense, we've got, in that sense, we have, we don't have that much up there. So we're going to kind of like use the things that will be very, very kind of useful for that. You'll see here in a moment. So let's just talk about the basic drunken bit. And hello, Robert, you just came in here. So we're going to take our walk, right, and we can even do like a little bit of a sway to start that, switching the weight from foot to foot, right? And we kind of just want to just kind of row like a kayak, right? Now, people know me. I'm not a very big fan of the saber staff as a weapon. And I often call it the kayak paddle to the underworld. And this is why, because when you're holding it like this is kind of like that same motion, okay? And a kayak paddle is a good biomechanical equal. So although I say it facetiously often, it's actually not a bad piece of advice. Anyway, so we're kind of rowing like this, right? And when I say it's a good analogy, look at how my hip moves, right? So I'm not just doing this, right? I'm moving back and forth, and I'm using my waist. So I'm connecting my weapon to my body, to my movements, right? And as I feel that momentum kind of going around in a circle, right? Moving my hips, I can add a little bit more movement to it. I can do I can start changing the pace of it, right? So I've got that kind of basic movement, right? Now, as we do that, as we're going back and forth, and this can start to look a little bit like capoeira here if you do it rhythmically. We're going to do it specifically non-rhythmically, right? We come forward, we're going to step across, we step back, and there. So that's the basic step, right? So whoop, 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 to that effect, right? We're going to add this in here, right? Notice how it moves with your hip, right? So as I go here, 1, 2, 3, right? So this is, while it looks like it's just moving kind of randomly and continuously, we have it connected to our movements, right? And as you see, as you get more unstable, this will look a little bit more erratic, right? There. Again, it is an illusion. If you do this correctly, you are in complete control, or at least in cognizant control of your movements. You know what you're doing, and you know what you're planning to do, right? So that as I'm kind of here, at any moment, I can stop. I can make one of these movements more, right, more meaningful, right? I don't want to swing around too much here, knock anything down. But so as you see here, right, as my hip goes forward, my stick will tend to go forward. Same thing over here, right? Okay, that's the basic, right? Just this kind of movement here, right? Now, when you use this movement, right, other movements can come out of it, right? We're just moving around like this. Let's take the drunkenness out of it a little bit, and we'll move like this. And then as you slide, you can now see different ways that it just kind of moves. And, you know, your body wants to move with it, right? So while I can just do this, and this is, you know, you see this kind of a whole lot, right? More often than not, I'm doing stuff like this. Right? Trying to be a little bit more contained here. I would, in a bigger space, I would probably be trying to use a lot more space. When I would stumble, it would carry me further. I am limited space here, but it's the idea still holds, right? As I'm moving like this, you see that kind of comes out. Right? All the time, my body is being kind of tossed about. Now, what will happen is as you get these things moving, right? You see, as I move forward and right, that's putting my body weight behind my strike, right? So as I'm here, there. Now, do you do that without, you can do that without any drunkenness, and it still holds true, right? If you connect your hip to your movements, to your shoulders, and you keep all of those things we talked about last time in mind, then adding this looseness and flow to it will tend to increase inertia, increase impact forces, and that kind of thing. So, all right. How's it going there, Oro? See what else we have here. We'll look for some questions here. Got one from Roberto. So it is the lack of The illusion of lack of control with the ability to change direction and take a hard stance at any time. Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily a hard stance, but knowing how to, you're basically learning how to use that kind of, lurch forward, where you're really putting yourself into the strike and all of that. It is the most extreme example of putting your body behind your movements, right? It's the martial arts equivalent to falling on your keys, where you have all of this mass being focused into one spot. So like you see, like that. I had a partner here. When these are the elbows, when I come in here like that, and I'm not only just giving them an elbow, but I'm basically falling onto the opponent, right? The same thing goes here. And this is something that anybody can integrate into kind of what they do, right? If I'm coming through here and I fall down onto it. So it's almost like I'm using my weapon to hold me up, right? And that's the reason for a lot of the fancy stick tricks, is if you commit your entire being to that particular strike and you're putting it in there, it's as if you are holding yourself up with your weapon using what it's hitting as support. That's going to put the most amount of force that you can at that particular moment into the strike, which will either help displace their weapon, require them to recover in some sense. You can bring them off balance, or it can literally knock the weapon out of their hand, open them up for follow-up strike, all kinds of things. And that's a conventional type of thing that you can use at any point, right? The training of a drunken type martial art, like a Drunken Immortals and that kind of thing, these exercises kind of help you envision and feel that. Like I said last time on Monday, doing the staff basics, a lot of people misunderstand solo exercise. It's not like shadow boxing where I'm imagining an opponent and I'm doing that. Now I know some people do, and a lot of people do. The real kind of intention for that is really not that. It is more as I said, the combinations of what you're making your body do, the kind of forces that you're putting your body under, the fatigue that you're creating, the cardio tax that you're putting on your body. If you look at most solo forms in Chinese or whatever, they tend to be around, a minute to 3.5 minutes, right? Somewhere around there. And that also tends to be about the length of a lot of encounters in real life. Very few of them go over, say, 4 minutes. Much to the to the contrary of what Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme movies would have you believe. But the point is that's kind of what we're doing, right? So we're learning to really imbue our weapon with a lot of oomph. The drunken aspect of it, right, allows us to really kind of let go and really go in there. But it's also not a way of swinging for the fences. We're not putting a lot of arm motion into it. We're trying to be hitting as hard as we can by using almost no energy of our own, right? So we're using the energy of gravity, of it pulling on our body. whether it be going backward, forward, down, up, all of that kind of thing. These are the forces that we're using, rather than thinking about this. Now that brings up another interesting benefit that this type of training can have, and then we'll get into um, some other things here. But when you are in a real encounter or something like this, and let's say it's not it's not a competition encounter. We're gonna make believe we're in some sort of world where we get into, a fight where or a conflict which lasts longer than a normal street fight, right? You're in a war, or something like that. You're fighting. You're being cornered by a gang or whatever. There's a whole bunch of people involved in this huge fight. Whatever the scenario is. If you get to the point where you are fighting and now you are so fatigued you can hardly move your body, right? And yes, even in a competition setting, you can reach that point, right, to where you gas and you've run and you're just kind of stumbling around. These techniques do teach you how to produce force when you cannot do it anymore in your body. That skill alone, obviously that takes a long time to develop, but it is something that is inherent in the method. All right. Make sense? Anybody? Let's see, we got any more questions here? How would you say this form impacts how you approach the point of contact? Alternatively opening up versus closing. Not precisely clear on what you mean by that, but as far as what I'm doing to make contact, what surfaces are making contact with the opponent, when I'm talking about like last time I was talking about the sliding of the staff, if I'm coming over here, I'm going to, and especially with drunken style, I'm going to be coming out and I'm going to try to get that end to move as fast as I can. And I want to try to hit it at both the biggest end and kind of the furthest one out from the point of rotation, right? So it's going to hit there. Am I thinking about, my second intention or anything with the opponent as far as, am I going to try to open them up or close them or anything like that? I think at least the way I approach this particular method and this particular training is that you are beyond that point. You are no longer able to choose these things, either because you are dazed, whatever, or you're caught in some situation where that is not available to you. So now you just kind of have to ride a wave of sensitivity of what is the other person going to do? What are they trying to do to you? How am I going to, if somebody pushes on me, how am I going to, it's these types of things. And we want to try to train them almost so that they're automatic reactions. So where we almost enter, and this goes into more of this stuff, which is going to go into Form 7, really starts to talk about that altered state of consciousness, that drunkenness is an analogy for this state of kind of unfocused focus. It's a difficult thing to really put into words, but that's really the main point of it. So as far as, are we thinking too much about that? Not really, because at this point in our training, we should have gotten that kind of already done. We will probably have our own decisions on what strikes work best for us, what are the most high percentages, what things tend to work for us with certain people, yada, yada, yada. And so we're going to get a lot of different incarnations or interpretations of this particular thing. I wish I could be a little bit more concrete, but this is not necessarily one of those types of methods. So, all right. So, good questions. Keep them coming. So we're going to talk about the stick. I talked about the stick because we're going to be going into that. Now, one of the things that I mentioned last time, especially with the Chinese methods and the Chinese arts, is that the stick is often used as an analog for the sword. More than likely, that's probably the first practice swords that people had were just sticks of about sword length. And then, from that point on, you get wooden practice weapons and wasters and, all this stuff. Now we have plastic, we have, steel that's not too bad for us or anything like that. But regardless, the stick is a very important weapon and tool. As we are moving here, if you're practicing this and you're using this drill, this exercise, right? This is where you're going to try to, right, get those weird little things going, right? And again, really focusing on weapon handling. The weapon that is associated most with drunken style is the jian, the double-edged sword. More than likely, this is because one of the immortals carries a sword. And I would also imagine it's also from a lot of its theatrical pedigree. The jian, as we talked about, really is kind of a rare-ish weapon to find on battlefields after the Tang Dynasty. It's pretty much a civilian weapon and all of that. So we can discern that this method is really intended more for civilians, that it's probably a little bit more abstract and divorced from a life of conflict, of banditry, or escorts, or or bodyguards, or something like that. And because of the sword there, and because of the immortal that carries the sword, probably has a scholarly sort of tint to it, right? Which is kind of, interesting that you have that type of thing. So I've got the steel one here, but I am going to use this one here so we can see it better, right? We want to be able to see this. So there are two ways that we can hold this while we are doing a drunken type of walk. The first way that you see a lot of times is they will have it underneath their arm like this, right? And then what happens is, okay, you have this. For instance, the opening to the drunken sword form, Wudong's drunken sword form, is simply where you take a drink, 1, 2, and then here, and then it starts, the thing starts. So that's the first way, right? Now, when you're doing this, right, we almost think of this as like the vessel, the pot, right? So as I'm going out here like this, it's almost like I'm trying to pour myself a glass of wine, and that's these movements right here. Now, obviously, that's not going to translate great to saber because the lightsaber. But regardless, here's our first, kind of foray into that. When the sword is deployed, one of the biggest techniques, or most important techniques here, is what people in the lightsaber will recognize as a chromosphere orbit, right? This is basically getting the sword to rotate on a point close to the balance point, right? So if I'm sitting here like this and I feel where the balance point is, right, about there. So when I'm doing this like this, right, I try to keep a point somewhere around there, kind of going. Now, we have a couple of things. These circles here, okay, you can call them lots of different things, right? Stirring, washing, all of that kind of thing. Very, very important for drunken style, because we use, when it's out here like this, we're doing this. Here, you want to know your positions and your guards very, very well, right? When you're using this type of method with this, that is what all of this stuff really is about, right? So what it's about here is, right, as I'm doing this, here are my parries, right? Okay, if I make contact with the sword there, and I have here. Now, the other thing that is really useful, and why drunken style is often with the straight sword, is because of the body movement, right? In dueling types of situations, being able to void back to, right, move out of the way of a strike while keeping your weapon ahead of you, very, very useful skill, right? So as I'm like this, all of these motions and that sway and all of that, right? As I said, I will sometimes pull out the drunken steps in the middle of a match, for fun or whatever. Would I do that if I was like fighting a to the death duel? I don't know. I don't know that I'd fight a to the death duel. But if I was caught in such a thing, I probably wouldn't be thinking that way, right? That being said, the stuff that you, by being able to do these types of things, right, you have within your system, if I do it really slowly, you can see you've got those rules which seemingly are being broken by you stumbling around all over the place, right, and breaking your posture and all of that, right, actually make a little bit of sense, right? As I'm coming in here and you see I'm kind of ducking behind my weapon, right? I'm moving that body, right? So I'm going back and I'm going forth, up, right, down, around, okay? Same thing with the stances. If I get the right, that kind of thing, right? when I'm doing these spins. They may not be for anything more than me reorienting my blade in a different way very quickly, right? It may be something that I'm using to keep my balance, to set something else up, right? The important bit is that whenever you're doing these spins, the point is that you should be able to stop pretty much anywhere. Keep going this way, right? Pretty much anywhere in that arc, right? When you want to, right? If you have to do another one of them to bring the weapon to a halt, well, that's something you need to work on. And when I'm doing this, if you want to talk about, and this is something we can definitely talk about, is something that's very good that you can take from Drunken and apply it, is if you're doing your orbits, is again, you try to put as little effort into it as possible, right? Nothing in the arm. The arm moves. We're going to move it from the shoulder. You don't have to do anything with the wrist. You just keep the wrist kind of there and keep your hands on the blade, or on the handle, sorry. And everything will kind of go that way. Now, as I'm doing this, now you can see even more ways that you can, use both drunken steps, orbits, right, guards, all of that kind of thing, so that when we're moving through all of these, right, while it looks like a bunch of random stuff, again, you can stop. So, all right. Let's see what else we got here. Okay. Yes, Lu Dongbin is the immortal that I was speaking of, who carries the sword. Sword being kind of a symbol of scholarship, gentlemanly pursuits, that kind of thing. The sword is called the gentleman of weapons. So it is seen as, very much like lightsabers, a more civilized, or a more elegant weapon for a more civilized age, that kind of thing. So that kind of holds true there. So obviously that is the stuff that's going to be the best for what you're doing. Now, are you going to just don't forget about this, right? Because when I'm here and I'm doing stuff, right, there's all that kind of stuff as well, right? So remember, this is just a sword you can touch the blade with, right? So if I'm holding it here, think of a handle, right? Let that slide there. When we're doing these, and I showed you how you can just let go of one hand and all of a sudden you're doing the eclipse orbit, and then you can put it back on. But then also remember, when you switch, you flip your hand. So you're constantly flipping between these two positions, right? That's something that is good, right? Here's one of these positions. Now, this is a position that will often turn into one of those posts, as I said. The floor down here is very slick, so I don't know that this is going to work. But what would happen is I put it in here, I plant the stick in the ground, and then I use the stick to hold myself up as I go down into a kind of a crouching thing too. The other way is coming down like this, using it that way. Again, my stick is just going to slip right out from under me, so I'm not going to do it here. But I'll try to do it at the practice space and get some video up on that. Anyway, the spheres of rotation of a weapon, whether it be a stick, whether it be a staff, whether it be a sword or a saber or anything like that, the stick and the jam, probably your best options, because you can go both ways. It's not, you don't have to put so much mind into it. Edge alignment obviously is going to come into it. But so when you're practicing, even in Form 2, in Makashi or whatever, and you're practicing these, and oh, it's so boring. Hate this, right? Well, this is what your body needs. These are the tools that are going to get you to the point where you can do pretty much whatever you think of at the time. Keep it moving at this, not letting it stop, putting the drunken steps in there or not, right? Coming out. So on and so forth. So, and this is just playing around, right? This is just, going through a bunch of random motions. When you put things together in a kind of coordinated way, obviously the training is difficult, but it does tend to yield some good things. All right. Do you think any of those ground techniques requiring purchase for the staff applicable with a saber staff? So the problem we're going to get into when you're taking anything that we do to a saber staff is the saber staff doesn't quite exist in real life and can't, right? So I know there are videos out there where they have two swords put together and it seems like it's okay. Yeah, okay, fine, right? But when you have the two lightsaber blades that you cannot touch, that can't support you, that can't, do any of those things, then yeah, you get into a little bit of a pickle trying to do some of the more fancy and stick appropriate things. That's why I'm showing you this, holding it in the middle, because this is essentially where you're going to hold a saber staff, and knowing this motion right here and how to move from that motion, right? Not changing your hands necessarily, but still being able to use it. I don't see, if you're using this, right, coming down here and over there like that, that's going to be your bread and butter. Bringing it back here to your hip is also going to be really important, because you want to keep your hands out of range of your opponent, right? You can't slide off to the end. That's the big problem. So there's so that's the only issue that you kind of have with that. That being said, you can still take a few motions, from it, right? See, right there, you can come up there, but even there, like if I come up here like this and I try to do this strike, the danger of me hitting myself with the other blade becomes pretty salient. Now, You can, of course, always move with your body. That's slow. So there are some definite disadvantages you have to overcome when using a saber staff. Keeping it unpredictable, keeping it mobile, keeping the thing moving, all of these things that we practice in this particular style of martial arts are all things that are going to help you keep yourself, specifically your hands and your hilt, safe if you're in some sort of sparring situation. However, take it for what it is, right? Let's see, we have Eddie B says, is the drunken saber used to deceive the enemy into thinking you aren't as skilled as you actually are? I don't know if it goes that far. I don't know that necessarily people think that way in the heat of the moment. I would say it's more of a short-term deception. I don't know where this person's going to step again. In certain cases, I can see, and maybe in a narrative case, like if you're doing choreography, you could use this as a shtick, where the other person thinks that you're so fatigued or they hit you so hard that you're kind of loopy and you're now out of it. Therefore, they kind of let their guard down and come into you thinking that you're kind of helpless. I could see something like that. I wouldn't count on anybody thinking that you're less skilled than you are. I always say that I'm very invested in people underestimating me, which I am. I really don't care if you don't think I'm any good. That's fine. But I don't have any control over that. I can just do what I do, and people will form their own opinions. I can, however, give this advice to everybody watching: never underestimate anybody. Just because somebody's form isn't aesthetically pleasing doesn't mean that they're not a good fighter. Just because they're a good fighter doesn't mean they're going to be good at forms. Just because they're good at forms doesn't mean they're not a good fighter, and so on and so forth. So, and you know what? Just because they don't have any training doesn't mean they're not a good fighter, right? And just because they're not a good fighter doesn't mean they can't seriously hurt you. These are the realities of conflict, right? When you get into a physical conflict, lots of things are pretty much left up to chance. Skill is a way that we hedge our bets, and that we try to keep ourselves safe. But the best skill that we have is avoidance. Drunken style kind of takes that to the nth degree, where we'll really, really kind of avoid doing anything, and then of course falling on the person or what have you. So that hopefully that answers that here. Do we have any questions here from the gallery? We have Becky and Oro here. Oh, okay. So we don't have microphones here. All right. Well, we'll continue. Yeah. Now I know Ben is not here. He mentioned on one of them that they have a drunken form in his style of, I don't know if it's Wing Chun or it's another Southern art that he did. But again, like I said, the drunken arts tend to show up a little bit in Southern styles. Not exactly sure why that is. I'm not exactly sure what the timeline is on any of this stuff. I have heard rumors of a drunken sword manual from the Ming Dynasty. I also know that drunkenness is a topic of Chinese humor and drama and stuff like that for a very, very long time. There's lots of humor about that and stuff like that in All Men Are Brothers or Outlaws of the Marsh. or the water margins, whatever you want to call it. So there might have been some drunken type of thing for a very, very long time, codified into the 8 Drunken Immortals or to any of these forms that exist now. I would be shocked if they're more than 100 years old. Just because. I do know that, though, it existed, contrary to what people think Jackie Chan said, that it did exist. It has existed in real life, in as far back as I know, as 1920. I've seen a film reel that was shot in 1920 on the streets of, I think, Guangzhou, and there is a street performer who does some double sabers and then does a drunken boxing form. So there you go. It existed at least that far back. The reason I think people are saying this, that Jackie Chan made it up, is because there was a documentary where what he meant, he was the movements that you see on film, those forms that he does, that's what he made up, that choreography, because there was no, Yen Wu-ping didn't know any drunken forms, and there was no real drunken form out there that was being taught or anything like that. So he had to make it up. The art, however, is old. It has existed for a long time. What form was it in back then? I don't know. But it did exist. However, Jackie Chan obviously has a lot to do with its modern interpretation and its modern aspect. And obviously, it's modern people knowing about it, because most of the time people have only heard about this through his movies. So there you go. So yeah, we have a comment here. Some people believe it was around since the late 900s AD. Like I said, the oldest record I have personally viewed is from 1920, that film reel. So I can assume that it existed before then for at least 20 years. So we're saying at least turn of the century. I've heard of a rumor of a Ming Dynasty manual for that, but I have not seen it. So I don't have any actual concrete evidence one way or the other. Yes, another comment. My understanding is there was a Taoist drunken Qigong, which was developed from the legend of the 8 Drunken Immortals, while the Shaolin form was external imitation art, and they got it blended. Those were separate for a long time. Don't know. Never heard that one before. As I said, I've researched it quite a lot. There certainly is a dearth of information about it. I'm fairly certain that the drunken style that is practiced at Shaolin Monastery right now is the modern Wushu version. That's the only one that I've seen out of Shaolin. If there's another one, I don't know. I don't know where it is. But like I said, drunkenness as a cultural thing is something that's part of Chinese culture. So it is very conceivable that many teachers went ahead and did a drunken style form. I mean, who knows who came up with this idea first, right? First drunken brawl or whatever. So, if somebody gets drunk, wins a fight while they're drunk and goes, maybe I should latch onto that one. When did that happen? I don't know. And like I said, there's also probably a theatrical element to all of this. Chinese opera has a very, very large part to play in modern Chinese martial arts, in the performance aspect of it, in its presentation, in their postures, and their, all of that kind of thing. And I think because people are very set on this idea that martial art is only about fighting, then it starts to muddy the water. Remember, martial arts in the Ming Dynasty, charioting, or no, that was before the Ming Dynasty, but let's say Han Dynasty, charioting, using a chariot was considered a martial art. Archery was considered the number one martial art pretty much all the way up to the Qing Dynasty. You know, these are not things that we traditionally call martial arts anymore. So this definition kind of goes here. And remember, so much of this stuff existed for decades or centuries in art, in stage plays, in this kind of thing, in this abstracted form, right? Where the only place that you're going to see it, and that's true in the Western. You know, there's a lot of things that we only know about today because they were preserved in art and literature, and we don't have a lot of actual archaeological historical advice or evidence for any of that kind of stuff. So yes, so supposedly the original shell form is in the Choi Li foot, but that's debatable. Like I said, I know that the Choi Li foot has a drunken form. I don't know it, so and I've only seen excerpts of it, so I can't really comment on it. So there's that. As far as what martial arts I study, and that's the thing, drunken style is not something that is standalone. I am from Ma Shi Tongwei, so that's Fanzi, Baji, Choujiao, Piqua, right? Some mantis, all of that kind of thing. But also from Taiji, I learned, you know, Taiji and Bagua, and I learned drunken from my Taiji and Bagua teacher, who was unfortunately very, very old, so he couldn't teach me some of the more you know, amazing things. Luckily, I did learn some wushu later on from my other teacher, Ma Chao. So I got some of that cool, fancy rock star stuff from him and was able to kind of put it together. So anyway, there's that. All right. So we're kind of coming up here to the end. Let's see if we have anything else that we haven't gone over. Yes. So, yeah. Now, I mean, that being, you know, all of this being said, right? Does it matter? We mentioned here Taoist, Shaolin, this, that, and the other, or whatever. That doesn't mean a whole lot. Even the wushu aspect, the performance-based competition form of drunken boxing, has a lot to offer physically, has a lot to offer, you know, your practice. It's fun, it's exciting, it's a crowd pleaser. You know, if you're young enough to do it, it's a good experience to get it. It teaches you how to fall. You'll never hurt yourself on a fall again, that's for sure. I've accidentally slipped on the ice on hard concrete, and these break falls, they come out automatically, so they kind of keep you safe. So there you go. Anyway, so that is it for the drunken weapons aspect of these things. Now, the general was away on Monday. He is planning on doing another one this coming Monday, which is, I believe, the 3rd, at the same time, so 1 o'clock there. And then he'll go over monkey stick, which is probably the most developed of the Chinese stick arts. Lots of really fancy, lots of really cool stuff done with the stick with that. And before that, on New Year's Day, we both will be doing a Q&A right here on the channel. We'll have you know, students who want to come, some of our apprentices, our knights, and all of that kind of thing. And then all of you can ask questions. on our Facebook, here, wherever, and we'll try to kind of answers what we can, because this is going to be transitioning into our Form 7. We're going to be taking a lot of these concepts, and that will be going into our Juju Vapad, or however you pronounce those things, those imaginary words. So, all right. If there is nothing else from the chat, I think we're good. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. We will see you Friday at, I think it's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, but there you go. Let me check on the actual time for that guy. I believe it is at 2. One moment. And anyway, tune in then. We'll be seeing you then at that time. So we will put the link on our Facebook page and all of that. I'll just it is, yes, at 2 o'clock. So 2 o'clock this Friday. Join us for some chat about this. We will go into all kinds of stuff regarding that. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Patience, practice, perseverance. Happy sabering.